Hello, all you cool cats and kittens. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. He's Vince. I'm Sean. Did you ever watch Tiger King on Netflix, Vince?
No, that one never crossed my COVID watch list.
Yeah.
It just seems so stupid to me that I was like, you know what? I can't get sucked into this.
It was actually very intriguing. Like, very,
I just didn't see
and
it.
I don't even know if I want to go down the road, but, he was gay. The Tiger King was gay. I don't know if you knew that. And
Did not.
One way or the other.
I thought somebody got eaten or something.
He
like
was
that.
basically, like some of the guys that he was with were allegedly straight before he came upon him.
Good for them.
We're and just like the cool cats and kittens was something that his adversary, I guess, this woman.
Yes.
She did a podcast, and she would open every podcast with that. All you cool cats and kittens kind of thing.
Now, isn't she the one that supposedly had a tiger eat her husband or something like that?
Allegedly a tiger ate her husband, but
there
they could never prove it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That's very X-Files stuff to me.
Yes.
I'm not.
Whereas he ended up in jail for, I can't even remember what he ended up in jail for.
No, okay.
I think it might have been plotting to kill her or something like that, if I remember right.
I mean, the shoe fits.
Yeah. Well, that's one way to get sidetracked at the start of our show.
That's what we do.
Right. It is Mailbag Day, so get in those questions for the mailbag, and Vince and I will do our best to address them, answer them, in whatever
Can we put the caveat out there that, again, that we are not recruiting experts?
Yeah, I did notice a recruiting question or two pop up. Yeah.
But Ryan is our recruiting guy, and I do believe he has his show on Mondays. And so, maybe save your recruiting stuff for Mondays. We'll do the best we can. We can talk in overall generalities and stuff like that. But what's going on with so-and-so's recruiting, that's not going to happen from the two of us. So
yes,
just putting it out there.
Exactly. Gordian Knot, thank you for the response. Tiger King hired an actual hitman who just took his money and then snitched on him. It rings a bell. It's been 5 years since I saw that, but like you said, that was definite COVID viewing, but it swept the nation during COVID viewing.
Yeah, it definitely did. I'm sure I binged a bunch of stuff during COVID. The biggest thing that I not binged, that's not even the right word because it didn't all come out at the same time, was The Last Dance. We kind of talked about that a few weeks ago.
Right.
But that was the big COVID viewing, I believe, for me, was The Last Dance. So,
I was watching anything.
I'm sure.
With a pulse, basically.
Well, and you didn't have to have a one-room schoolhouse either. That was
very true.
That was very overwhelming to have 5 children all on different curriculum in different live classroom meetings in different corners of the household.
I bet it was.
It was just, man, I hated it. It was awful. It was a very terrible time for many reasons, but that is the biggest one. That was horrible.
All right, well, we've got some questions start up and ready to go. Again, get your questions in as you're jumping in the chat here tonight, and hit that like button while you're at it and help boost our visibility, if you would, as we get things going tonight. Interesting one right off the bat with CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, Deuce Knight, Noah Grubbs, all in the quarterback room. Will more than 3 of them start a game in their time at Notre Dame? So will 3 of those quarterbacks start at least one game in their time?
Well, we can cross off Angeli because he has started a game. So that's 1. So he's definitely on the list.
Did he start a game? What game did he start?
The bowl game.
Oh, that's right. God.
Yeah.
Thanks.
How quickly you forget on his amazing his NFL Hall of Fame.
My mind went my mind started through the schedule of the regular season. I'm like,
right.
Oh yeah, bowl game.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we know that's at least 1, right? I have a very good feeling that CJ Carr will start at least 1 game. So that's 2. And then between the combination of Minchie, Knight, and Grubbs, I absolutely think one of those 3 will definitely start a game. So that puts it at 3. But the question is, will more than 3? And that's where it gets difficult.
It does say more than 3.
That's where it gets difficult, right?
Well, and that's part of the challenge now, and that's where fans are going to have to be patient, because this is something completely new. And I know I've said this quite a bit. Something you're going to have to get comfortable with is being very uncomfortable when it comes to the transfer portal. Like you're stacking all this talent, but there's no way all of them are sticking around the entire time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, this is my opinion, but I think, either Minchie or Angeli is going to transfer out, one of those two. I don't know that. I think there's enough distance between Carr and Knight where you could pass the baton from Carr to Knight, but then you've got Grubb sitting there. So, like, what does that look like, right? So I will say, because of backup status and things of that nature, I will say more than 3.
I think so too. I definitely, like, you went through it there, and between like the fact that Angeli has already started a game does cross him off since he was included on this list, and that actually helps out quite a bit. But I think Carr and Knight, I would say, very bullish on, all in on that. And then, the question will be kind of, I'm trying to think of the timeline. I think Grubb's potentially as well.
Sure.
Just because of, you expect that Deuce Knight, you basically, when you're getting this kind of talent and into the kind of offense that they're going to be playing in, you expect that these are all going to be 3-year guys. Like, again, that's what you have to go into this expecting. So Knight, as we've talked about before, it potentially would have to sit for a little bit with CJ Carr right in front of him. But CJ Carr, you're not expecting a start from him this season. And so that basically you expect him, he's going to sit this year, but you're not expecting more than 2 years out of him once he gets on the field, given the talent that he has and the level of play that you expect out of him. So then that puts Knight on the field. And then because his window gets shortened a little bit, Grubbs is also going to have to be willing to sit for a little bit. That will be a question, but I'm going to say at least 3 of them do as well, or more than 3 of them do as well.
Yeah. And I think, again, I don't know that any of these guys are all competitors. These guys are all, when you're a competitor at this level, obviously you're coming in, you want to play and all that. I don't think Notre Dame is selling these guys on, hey, you're going to come in as a true freshman and start. Like, that's what we expect of you. No. I don't think that's the conversation. I think they're very realistic. Excuse me. I think they're very realistic with all of these guys, and they're telling them, like, look, there's a lot of really good talent ahead of you. You're very talented. We want you in the mix. You could be the future of Notre Dame football, but it's not going to be the day you step foot on campus. So these guys are all, I think these guys are all coming in with a very realistic view of what it looks like. And they probably told them, hey, it's going to be an open competition, all of these different things. But the reality is you're probably going to redshirt.
Well, and that's what they have to tell them. They're incoming freshmen. Like you said, they're not promising these guys are going to step on the field from day one when they show up at Notre Dame. There's no way they're making those kind of promises. Just no way.
You can't. I mean, that's just not even realistic. I mean, if my kid was in their shoes and if a school told me that and I'm looking at the depth chart, I would immediately call their bluff. I was like, that, how can you even say that? That's not even fair to the depth chart that you have sitting here in front of you and the talent that you have. Like, that's not even like, don't even go there. Like, that would make me cross them off the list. Like, if you're not even going to be honest with me, then we're not going to look here. You know what I mean? Like, that honesty is a big piece of recruiting. At least it should be.
And it seems like this coaching staff is very honest about with their approach and everything they do.
And I think more often than not, and in a vast majority of more often, that works out to their advantage, that they're honest with these kids about what their future could potentially be at Notre Dame, what the depth chart looks like, all of those things, right? I think Notre Dame is a very honest place as far as the coaching staff and what they're selling and all of those different things. And I think it's well received by recruits and their families. And look, there's a reason that NFL players' kids are looking at Notre Dame the way they are, because those guys have been through this. They've been through the recruiting. They've been through the NFL. Like, they've been through this, and they like what Notre Dame is selling from a realism standpoint. You know what I mean? So I think that's absolutely part of it, is the honesty factor.
I can tell that you haven't done a show since last week. Like, you came to go today. Like, you were ready. You were just ready to roll. Let it all out. I sat in my
office most of the day today with nothing going on, which is fantastic. I mean, that's awesome. But, like, didn't really get a chance to talk to many people. Like, I got it all bottled up, and here it comes.
USMA 87 wants to know when the flip rumors for Grubb start. And I would basically say about 9 months from now, sometime next spring when he's going into his senior season, just like with Deuce Knight right now. I think that's about the time it's all going to start. And, somebody else said about the time that some of those Florida media types see him slinging the ball down there. I mean, that's what it's going to happen because now he's committed to Notre Dame, which is naturally going to raise his profile. And that's part of what you have to sweat out as well. And part of this game, again, even though you and I aren't big recruitniks and such, it's part of the game that you have to sweat out. The earlier 100%. You get a commitment, that's the longer you've got to keep them committed until it's actually time to sign. But remember, hasn't been fully approved yet. But by the time it comes for Noah Grubbs to sign, the early signing period is supposed to be basically 2 years from now in June instead of December. So that window shortens a little bit potentially. If assuming they get it all approved and everything, they're supposed to, but they haven't yet. 1 year from now because it won't be for this June. Well, for him though, I'm saying for Grubbs specifically.
Like he could sign next June. He could sign 1 year from now. I believe
going into his senior season.
Yeah, going into your senior season.
I guess that's right.
So it'd be 1 year from now he could actually sign.
Because that would take the place of essentially signing after his senior season and then early enrolling if he wanted. Yeah, you're right.
So as
I was thinking, I guess he was even younger than he actually is.
Well, I mean, he's still pretty young. He's coming out of his sophomore year. I mean, that's the fact that he's already committed is just nutso. But I mean, that's the world that we live in, Sean, and. I don't know. We could discuss this some other time, but I do want to find out at some point how you feel about the June signing day and what that means and all that.
I want to I'm not sold on it. Like, I don't know. Like for me, it felt like the end of July made a little bit more sense. I don't know how much difference 1 month is going to make, but it does seem early.
It does.
Anyway,
it seems really, really early to me. I agree with you. I think it should have been like right before, like 2-a-days start, right? So like end of July. I think that made a lot of sense. Kids could go into their senior year, not have to worry about it. And I know the fear is that kids are going to sit out their senior year of high school and all that kind of a thing. And that would be a real shame if that ended up taking place, but it will. I mean,
I like the intent of it. The intent is there's so much going on in December, and now with an expanded college football playoff, there's going to be obviously more teams involved in that playoff and playing earlier in December when you've also got coaching changes, transfer portal, and all that stuff. And they're trying to take some of that out of that December period, which I completely don't mind. But June, I'm a little, if I'm buy, sell, hold, I guess I'm holding on that. Right now, whether or not I completely am in favor of the June period.
It's so early, man.
I know.
Holy cow. Because then they're going to probably keep the one in February, I would imagine, right? And so you're going to have 6 months between like when the early guys sign and then the rest of your class signs. That's crazy. 6 months is a long time,
Right. Well, and I don't, there's some people who say, just go back to the February signing period. And I don't particularly care for that though, either. And I think that that's kind of where they're stuck a little bit. If you're not going to just go till February, then June is one of the few times, I guess, that makes sense from my perspective on the calendar.
Well, and I will say, I don't want them to take the February signing day away. Because if they're going to put one before the senior, like it was one thing when they had it in December and they had it in February, right? Guys still get to play their senior years. There's a lot of change that can happen in recruiting rankings, in all of these different things when they play their senior year of high school. You know what I mean?
And so Jesse asked me this, once they go to the June signing period, or I think I may have asked Jesse, we talked about it anyway. Do you think we start seeing seniors opt out of their senior high school season once they've signed on the dotted line? What's the incentive to play, especially if they do have some kind of, even if it's a minor injury or whatever?
I mentioned that a couple minutes ago. I was like, why won't kids sit out at that point? And that's going to be the obvious negative of having that early signing day. The vast majority of kids are going to play their senior year. The vast majority, because a lot of those kids want to either up their stock or, because they didn't sign before the school year started. You're going to see, here's the deal. You're going to see a smaller signing class, I think, prior to senior year with Now, maybe the high majors like Notre Dame and things like that, maybe they get like 25 kids to sign prior to their senior year. Maybe that's a possibility. But I think as you go down the list, like let's say a MAC school, for example, they're not going to have 20, 25 kids to sign before their senior year. There's going to be kids that get offered and things like that during their senior year or after their senior year. And so they're going to almost have like a split. You're going to have 2 signing days that are still very, very important, right? Before and then after. It's going to be different than, because right now, pretty much everybody signs in December. And then there's a couple stragglers that end up signing in February. But these lower schools, their major signing day is still February because they've got to let the dust settle from the big boys.
Right.
And find out what's left over.
Yep, exactly. Michael says Brandon Ewers did the opt-out his senior season at Texas.
He did, but he also enrolled early. So it was a little bit different. He reclassified because of NIL.
So like he just gave up his whole season and showed up there in the fall, basically.
Right, because they wouldn't let him get NIL money as a senior in high school. And so he went to Ohio State a year early so he could cash in on NIL money. Gotcha. So that was a little bit different, but he's right. I mean, he did give up his senior year, but it was definitely money motivated for sure.
Want to stick with the quarterbacks.
Okay.
We were talking about them. Among the Notre Dame quarterbacks, Riley Leonard, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey, Steve Angeli, Deuce Knight, and Noah Grubbs. We expanded by 1 for this one. Which will be first round NFL draft picks? I am very confident. If I'm going 1 to 10, I'm 8 on both Leonard and Carr.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What do you think about the rest of those guys?
No, I'm very high on both Leonard and Carr. Number 1, I think Leonard is going to have a really good season with Notre Dame. And because they have a really good season, he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks to come out. He was already getting a lot of NFL talk before his injury, talking about coming out after his 3rd year. Obviously, because of his injury, that didn't happen. Now he's at Notre Dame for his 4th year. I think he could very easily go in the first round. Quarterbacks are overvalued. That happens all the time. I think CJ Carr has the absolute ability to be a round 1 quarterback. After that, this is where it gets tough, to be honest.
Because now we're projecting 6 and 7 years down the road.
That's
so what we think these high school guys are going to be.
That's
right?
so hard.
I know.
Okay, I mean, I don't think Angeli is a first round quarterback.
No,
so I'll knock him off of this list. I don't know enough about Deuce Knight and Noah Grubbs to say that they're going to be a first round NFL draft pick. I mean, Noah Grubbs hasn't even taken the SAT yet. I mean, I can't project him to the NFL. I'm sorry. And Deuce Knight's a bit of a project still. I mean, he, with his throwing motion and some different things, like he's an elite quarterback. There's no doubt about it, but he's not a finished, polished product. And that is what Notre Dame was selling him when they got him to come to Notre Dame.
Right.
Like, hey, you're going to need some time, that whole
exactly.
thing.
And that helps that, again, like when you talk about what kind of things are being pitched to these guys and promises of playing time and stuff like that. Well, you've got CJ Carr in front of you. He knows he's got CJ Carr in front of him for a couple of years. And the fact that he does have some of those things to work on, by the time his time comes, you would expect him to be a much more polished product after working with Gino Guidugli and Mike Denbrock for a couple of years. But in terms of trying to predict whether or not they're going to be a first-round draft pick right now, I'm going to pump the brakes on that.
Yeah, that's a big hold for me as well. I'm totally fine with Leonard and Carr, kind of projecting them out. After that, I'm in a very much a holding pattern. I need to see them start a few games for Notre Dame first.
Yes. Exactly.
Or at the very least, see him at practice a little bit more often.
Right.
Right.
Now, all that said, after seeing what Mike Denbrock did with Jaden Daniels over the last couple of years, just one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Riley Leonard and CJ Carr, for that matter, is when you see that, and you also see some of the things that Gino Guidugli has done in his time here, that it makes me feel more confident.
Sure.
1, in the development all these guys are going to get, and 2, in that long-term outcome goal. That they're going to be in much better position a few years.
I like where it's trending, right? I mean, if I was going to say that, they're trending in that direction, but man, so many things can happen between now and then. I would never place any kind of bet or anything on everybody else. Like Leonard and Carr, I feel fairly comfortable about. The other ones, it's way too early for me.
Having one
quarterback.
elite quarterback committed can have a great effect on recruiting outcomes, says Irish Gordian Knott. How will having two elite quarterbacks affect skill position recruiting?
It's gonna be great. I mean, that's as long as and I don't know Noah Grubbs at all, and maybe Ryan can chime in here, but as long as he is an active guy on the recruiting trail and he's trying to get guys into the fold, and he's doing all of the things that like a CJ Carr did, and what I believe Deuce Knight is doing, then the offense is going to be just fine. Like they're still going to recruit at a high level. Skill guys are still going to come, and so are offensive linemen, by the way. But they will continue to be a high level recruiting organization as long as they keep getting high level quarterbacks.
I agree. I mean, Ryan and I were talking about it earlier this week, and one of the reasons Noah Grubbs wanted to commit so early, one, he went out and did all these visits. He's already been around the country and visited a lot of campuses and seen a lot of different things.
Sure.
But two, he wants to be the point man in recruiting for that 26 class. And, that's something that he wants to do. And we've seen that from these other quarterbacks, like whether it's CJ Carr or Steve Angeli or whoever it happens to be. Those guys have wanted to be out there beating the drum for Notre Dame. And when Notre Dame keeps stacking quarterbacks like these, it's going to do nothing but help that, to like sending signals to elite wide receivers that you're going to have elite quarterbacks throwing you the football in an elite offense when you get to Notre Dame. It's massive.
Well, and you're going to run into the same kids over and over again on the recruiting trail, throughout this process, right? And guys start to know each other and they start to exchange information. And I'm seeing it even on a smaller scale, just watching my kid go through the recruiting process. Like we run into the same kickers and the same punters and the same this and that at each stop. You know what I mean? They're all competing against each other. And I'm seeing parents that I see, on a regular, so these guys are going to see each other and they're going to form bonds and they're going to communicate. And, look, this is going to make me sound old, but like even, the communication between kids right now, like it's not like it used to be back in like the 80s when these recruits would get on campus for the first time at the awards ceremony for Notre Dame football in January, right? And it's the first time they're all meeting each other. These guys will have known each other for years by the time that rolls around. You know what I mean? And they communicate with social media and all of that stuff. So these guys all know each other, man. And they all keep running into each other and they will all recruit each other to go to whatever school that they want them to go to. You know what I mean? So it's absolutely a thing. Absolutely. And it's usually spearheaded by the quarterback because he's the first one, generally, one of the first ones to commit in a class because it's the most important position.
Joe, other than quarterback and receivers, which position group do you want to see the greatest improvement from next year?
The greatest improvement from last year. So we're comparing it to last year, and we're not allowed to say quarterback and wide receivers. Okay.
I mean, Viper is the one that jumps out to me.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Take it.
Like, that's the one I would say. Look, I think we all know that they need more production out of that Viper spot. Now, I've said all along that I don't think that it is dire because they still had a pretty good pressure rate and sacks last year, even though they didn't get that many of either one. They got a solid amount out of Jordan Botelho, but we all think that there's something more there for Jordan Botelho. So whether it is him or Junior Tui Alamaka or whoever it happens to be there, Bubakar Traore, I couldn't think of his name there for a second. I was seeing his number, but I couldn't think of his name. Like they need more production out of that spot. So that's the one that I would put at the top of the list right now.
That's fair. I like that. I agree with Coach Bent. I think tight end, and that was only because of injury. But I would like to see, tight end be a bigger part of the offense from a statistical standpoint. And obviously they're not going to be in a bunch of 12 and 13 personnel, but I still think the combination of, the two tight ends that they're going to have, I think they can be very key in this offense. So I will say tight end on this one. And here's another one. And I know this is going to shock everybody that I will say this. I think kicker needs to be a lot better this year than it was last year. there were times where it was kind of an ooh-ah moment because he was kicking 55-yarders and things like that. I want consistency. I want those inside the 40.
Let's not
field
forget
goals
he
to
missed
be
a
a
kick
no-brainer.
against Ohio State, and
That's what I'm saying.
Like it's easy to forget that because it happened earlier in the game, but if he makes that kick, we're having a different conversation about that game a year, almost a year later.
So like that's one that needs to be better. It needs to be better than last year. You know what I mean? So those are the two I guess I would pick off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that those are good ones. And really, when you eliminate quarterback and wide receiver, I think it
makes it tough.
It makes it tougher, yeah, for sure.
But isn't that a compliment to the depth on this team too? That it's really hard to kind of come up with
depth
other
in the coaching and everything else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So DK says, what's one position on each side that is make or break? I mean, the quarterback for starters, right? Like if we're not going to eliminate the quarterback, I think that's goes without saying.
I will say, just to be different, I will say offensive line because I still think there's a lot of question marks on the offensive line, and I couldn't pick them for the last question because they weren't terrible last year.
Yeah,
and I'm not expecting the offensive line this year to be markedly better than last year or anything like that. But that position group, if they're a mess, let's just say they're a mess. Well, that's a big problem for the offense. I don't think that will be the case, but that's a position group that needs to be make or break on the offensive side.
Again, if I look at the defensive side of the ball, I can't, even though they need improvement from the Viper, I don't think it's a make or break position because they've got enough talent around that position where they can still get a lot of pressures from everywhere, whether it's the interior defensive line, whether it's the opposite big defensive end with RJ Oben and Josh Burnham over there, the linebackers or the Rovers or whatever it happens to be. So I don't think Vipers make or break. I guess I would just say cornerback depth. That is still a little bit of a concern to me, even though things look like they're going in the right direction with Benjamin Morrison. And I saw somebody tweeted an interview from his camp last week. Remember, we were talking about, hey, go to his camp in Phoenix for the kids and see if he's wearing that sling or not. He was not wearing the sling. He looked like he was doing all right. But still, there is an injury there right now going into the season. And I just think that the depth at that corner position could really be make or break, depending, like if you hit a stretch where maybe you're without one or two of those guys, that could really be crucial.
I'll just say linebacker. I think everybody's expecting linebacker to be so much better than it was last year. I don't think people realize linebacker was a pretty solid position group last year, and you're basically changing over the whole group. And so, yes, we think that they're more talented than the group that was in there last year, but are we all on the same page that they're going to be more productive? I don't know that I am yet because I haven't seen them on the field doing it. And so that's kind of a make or break situation. I think the defensive line is going to be good, but they're going to be good enough that they should allow those linebackers to scrape and do what they need to do back there. But they're all young. They're all inexperienced except for Kaiser, but he's going to be playing in a different position than he was last year. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on that linebacking core.
I don't disagree with that. Interesting question that Josh Miller slipped in. Would you try to bring back Harry Hiestand to be an analyst now that they can coach on the field? You could try, sure, but I just don't get the notion. The fact that Harry came back for 1 year and then retired again as soon as Tommy Rees left, I just don't think he has the want to be a football coach. I think he's where he is. He seems pretty content in retirement.
Yeah. I mean, sure, you could reach out to him. I mean, that's the question, right? You can reach out to him. But you also,
I mean, like, like an analyst can coach on the field, but do you want Joe Rudolph to feel like he stands looking over his shoulder all the time as well?
Right.
Like that's awkward.
Right. Seriously. Yeah, I mean, I would attempt maybe because you can never have too many horses in the stable as far as coaching, in my opinion. But at the same time, I just don't think it would be a fit. I don't think he'd want to be in the shadows. I think he'd want to be the guy.
Yeah.
And that's not.
He's going to invest that time. Yeah. Exactly. And again, it just after the way things went down the last time, it just doesn't feel like that's time that he wants to invest in it. And it's his prerogative.
Right.
Scale of 1 to 10. Will the Irish go 11-1 this season and push in the playoffs to end as one of the top teams?
7.5. 8. I'm tempted to say 8, but I don't know if that's too high. But I think 11-1 is absolutely that's the floor to me with this schedule and the way I think this team is going to play. And so I think if they're 11-1, then they're in the playoffs and they're hosting the first round.
I concur. I would go like an 8 on that. Pretty solid. The over-under is 10.5, which feels high, especially compared to years past. But again, you look at the schedule, and there's no reason not to believe that they can go 11-1. I think most people are looking at, you win at Texas A&M, you're probably you're on your way to feeling very confident that you're going to end up with at worst an 11-1 type record.
Sure, it's fair.
So where was it? Tyler asking, give a few teams you'd like to see Notre Dame play in the future. I want to save this because I've been, just with things going on, I've been planning a schedule show where we're going to talk specifically, like, and it's probably either going to be this Friday or next Monday when you and I are together, and we can talk about what the schedule looks like this year, what it's shaping up to look like next year, and what we would do with future schedules in the, in the 12-team and potentially 14-team playoff era. What do you think about that?
I think I'm ready for it. I love
a little down and dirty on it.
Yeah, I love talking schedule, and I like talking about, maybe matchups that I'd like to see, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely down with that.
Exactly. And some people I've seen, like on the boards, every now and then someone will suggest, hey, what about playing this team or that team or whatever else? And we just had Boise State, obviously, added yesterday. So I want to get kind of more in depth on that. So I'll save that for that show, because again, I think we'll kind of go, we'll kind of jump in with both feet on that. And I think we can really come up with some good stuff. So the question is, even with an outstanding season, will Billy Schrauth absolutely return for his senior year?
I don't know Billy personally. I don't see why he wouldn't. I mean, I don't think he would have enough, this is a new day and age, obviously, but I feel like he would definitely come back. I feel like he would come back for his senior year. I use the word definitely. I feel like he would come back.
But like an outstanding season. So
as a guard? Like, what's your definition of an outstanding season as a guard? I think.
If he goes out there and he looks like Quentin Nelson game in and game out, like
even Quentin Nelson was here for 4 years. Wasn't he here for 4 years, or did he leave early? I can't remember.
I believe he ended up 4 off the top of my head.
Quentin Nelson's the best guard that's ever played at Notre Dame.
But that last year was obviously his best. He was dominant.
Agreed. But he also played for 3.
No, you're right. But I'm saying if Billy Schrauth is projected, what'll that be? 8-9 months from now as a first-round draft pick, 7-8 months from now as a first-round draft pick, I could see him leaving.
If you're projected as a first-round draft pick as a guard, then you leave. I don't see that being the case.
Well, again, Quentin Nelson did.
I get it.
He
also had 3 years of film. That's the difference for me. I don't think you can draft a guard after being a starter for 1 year. Be like, that's the guy for our future.
I think if you look like Quentin Nelson, and I understand what you're saying. Like, you've got more film, and so
Quentin Nelson didn't look like Quentin Nelson in the first 2 years he played.
No, and I'm not saying Billy Schrauth is going to, but I'm just saying Vince, who likes to deal in his absolutes, I'm not going to deal in an absolute. I would say scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably put it at a 2. I think that there would still be a great chance, but if he's being talked about as a guard, as a first-round draft pick, that's the instance where I could see him leaving. Like that's the door I would leave open for Schrauth. But otherwise,
that's fair.
I do think that he comes back.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that.
Okay,
I'm good with that. I mean, if anybody is being projected as a first-round draft pick, you go.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. So I guess almost every starter, I would put it at like a 1 or a 2, because you never want to shut the door completely on the possibility. I just think for an offensive lineman specifically, I think that's a little bit harder. That's a little bit harder to do. I'll say that.
Right. Ryan, how old do you think Tommy is? I think Tommy has said he was born around 85, 86 before.
Oh, really?
So I think I've heard him say
upper
that.
30s.
Yeah. A little bit younger than you, 4 or 5 years. So that'd be like 5 or 6 years younger than you, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yep, it would.
Yeah.
It would.
Favorite Notre Dame game you've watched? Good follow-up, Tyler, since I shot your first one down. But I did tell you we're going to do a full show on it. So, Tyler, consolation question. Favorite Notre Dame game that you've watched?
USC Notre Dame 2005. I mean, it didn't go Notre Dame's way, obviously, and when I say watch, I'm thinking live, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been good games in the past and all of that kind of stuff. So, for me, that was the most exciting game I've ever watched. I mean, from start to finish, the emotions, just everything about it. I mean, I have vivid memories of that game. That's the one for me.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about it in person, that is definitely it. And, you and I talk all the time about where we stood at the end of that game as we were right down around like the 10-yard line, watching the things transpire at the end with Jarrett making that catch on 4th down and then seeing the ball shoot up in the air on the opposite sideline and feeling like it was in the air forever and then seeing it come down and then obviously ultimately the push, finished it off. But I mean, that's the one that stands out in terms of in person. If you're going to go historical, I saw somebody say the 93 Florida State game. That's up there. The 1988 Miami game. That's one of those, that's obviously up there as well. It's funny. 1988 Notre Dame Miami and the Kirk Gibson 1988 World Series Game 1 pinch hit home run off Dennis Eckersley both happened on the same day.
That's right.
And I watched both of those games in full on that same day. But here's the funny thing. Until about 7-8 years ago, I never had the memory that both of those things happened on the same day. I remember distinctly watching both of those. I didn't realize they happened on the same day until I was looking at something, and it might have been like Sports Illustrated covers or just read something happened on the exact same day.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Random, but yeah. Too big, especially obviously if you're a Notre Dame fan, huge memories. Will Notre Dame have a Heisman winning quarterback within the next 5 years?
Heisman is such a tough, stupid award.
There's so many variables that go into it.
Because you want to say that it generally goes to the quarterback of the best team for the most part, but obviously that trend got bucked last year. Mm-hmm. But I still say that happens more often than not. There were a lot of trends that got bucked last year. Easy schedules, still win a national championship, things of that nature, and Heisman going to a guy from almost a losing team. They should. I mean, if we think that Riley Leonard, CJ Carr is as good as they are, if they are as good as we think they are, then they should be in the conversation for a Heisman Trophy. But so much has to go right. So much has to go in their direction, both team-wise and player-wise, that I would still probably put it under 5 if it was like a scale of 1 to 10. But they should at least have somebody in New York, I would hope, right?
And that's what, I would give it like a Heisman winning quarterback scale of 1 to 10. I would go 6, 7 right now. Will they have a finalist? I would be in the 8, 9 range. Will they at least have a finalist?
Look at you going out in your absolutes.
It's not an absolute.
I'm impressed. You are out there on that limb, buddy.
I'm just I just think that bringing in Denbrock in these quarterbacks that they're getting, man, I just think that we're going to start to see some elite play in that quarterback position. And because they're Notre Dame, because they're going to be in the playoffs, they're going to be getting a lot of attention as a result. So
that's the way it should go. I mean,
yeah.
based on everything we know, that is absolutely the way it should go. I am just such a pessimist when it comes to the success of Notre Dame at this point. It's like I get excited and then I get crushed is what ends up happening. And it's like
Yeah.
like every other Notre Dame fan, man, it's like we just get our hearts broken every year, it feels like.
DK, going back to the Notre Dame game favorite Notre Dame game, 2006 Michigan State in East Lansing. That was the Zibikowski game where he ripped the ball away from the guy
Is
and
that the
returned
one?
it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that was.
Pretty sure I was there.
I know I was there.
Yeah, because I went to a couple Michigan State games. Is it the same one that was in like the rainstorm?
Yes, that was the Zibikowski.
Okay,
game.
Yeah, I was definitely there because I felt really bad for my wife because she was sitting in the stands in the rain and I was in the press box. But yeah, that I was definitely at that game.
Andrew, going back to the quarterback conversation, he says, "Where are the wide receivers? They can't throw to themselves.
They're here.
Look, like, is the receiver recruiting not getting better? I mean, don't get stuck on, well, they're not getting exactly what they want in one class. I mean, look at what is already on campus, and the fact that just like they did this year, if they don't see the production they think they want or need out of the receiver position, you can still go to the transfer portal
and
get a couple veteran wide receivers just like they did this year.
Right.
And Marcus Freeman talked about this last week, and it's basically the way we've talked about it as well. Notre Dame is still going to be much higher percentage a high school recruiting program, but they are going to augment the roster and fill holes on a year-to-year basis with the transfer portal. I mean, that's the benefit of it. They're not going to be a transfer portal school all in, just going out and, revamping the roster every year, but they're going to fill key spots in any given year with the receivers. And you also do expect that if the quarterbacks are better, they should just automatically make your receivers better as well. If the quarterback is putting the ball where it's supposed to be and he's willing to make the throws that he's supposed to make.
Disagree? Completely agree. No, I completely agree. And I think people underestimate how good this wide receiver room is for this year. Yeah. That's what I'll say that.
Again, Andrew, wants to.
Well, he's not going to be happy with anything that we say until he sees it.
He's talking about how, the Heisman winners have been loaded. They're absolutely loaded with NFL talent. Is Notre Dame loaded? No, they're not loaded now, but that's what recruiting is for. And again, don't get hung up on they're not hitting home runs with every swing right now. It's going to happen. And it's what we started the show talking about. When you've got these elite quarterbacks, you expect that that they're going to help you recruit some of that elite skill position talent.
And I guess I would say this, it's like the chicken and the egg. Did they become high caliber NFL receivers before or after they had that quarterback that was throwing them the football?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like they were playing in. And,
the Addison kid from USC was the number one receiver for Caleb Williams. And I guess I'll show my ignorance here to the USC roster. But how many other NFL receivers did they have? When Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy? I mean, I know the Addison kid was, but they cherry picked him from Pitt, right? Because remember, Pat Narduzzi was pissed. So, they didn't recruit him.
I think Drake London was the year before, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that he played with Caleb Williams. But I mean, USC, they actually have done, over the years, they've done a really good job recruiting those elite wide receivers. I do think it helps being in Southern California, though. Some of that automatically helps out. But I think they're going to be fine. I think Notre Dame is going to be fine. And
I will say this, as I'm looking at the list of Heisman Trophy winners, right? From 16, 17, and 18, you got Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Kyler Murray. Did they have a bunch of NFL talent at wide receiver, or were they just really good at what they did?
I think Lamar Jackson was much more about him.
Sure.
Again, like Oklahoma, remember that was when Lincoln Riley was there, and they have produced a few highly touted wide receivers of their own. CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, Hollywood Brown, like both of those guys came out of that program who are in the NFL right now. Thank you, Andrew. Hollywood Brown. Yep, you're exactly right.
Okay.
Obviously, I can't remember exactly who was
Well,
with,
and again,
who in
I don't
what
know the
year.
rosters of these guys, but I don't remember there being, that, and that's just me talking. But again, what happened first? Were the wide receivers really freaking good, and then they got a quarterback that they threw the ball to, or were those guys made good because of the quarterback?
Because they were in that system, and the quarterback they were playing with, and the coach who was coaching them, obviously Lincoln Riley.
Right.
And I think that when you look at now, there was some talent at LSU, obviously. They've had some pretty good talent of their own when it comes to the wide receiver position the last few years. But I think Denbrock had an impact on that. And don't base everything on what's happening right now, even though there's some good talent there right now. But between recruiting and the transfer portal, I don't think there's anything to worry about. I don't think there's anything to worry about at all. I'm not panicking on that by any means.
No, me neither. The wide receiver room is just fine. It's just fine.
Ghost X, would you prefer Notre Dame join a conference for it to be the SEC over Big Ten? I feel like, I don't know what that's supposed to be. Canut would maybe make this move as it's outside the norm and very ND. Do you know who's KN? Like, I don't know who that's supposed to be. KNUTT. I don't know who that
he's
is.
saying Rockney. Newt
would
is
Rockney,
what he was saying.
Would Rockney have done it?
Because he was an innovator and he did all these different things. And hey, remember, Newt Rockney wanted to be in the Big Ten. The Big Ten didn't want him. So there's that. At this stage in 2024, I wouldn't want to be in either one. I mean, the Big Ten makes more sense, I suppose. But now that they've added some of these West Coast teams and things like that, I wouldn't want to be part of the Big Ten either. So now you're forcing my hand and you're making me pick one. I would pick the Big Ten over the SEC.
Yeah.
Because I think they share more like values.
Right.
So I would pick the Big Ten over the SEC if those are the only two options that you're giving me. But I would still prefer to not be in any conference.
Yes. Completely agree with that. I would not pick the SEC over the Big Ten. I think the academics will be a big factor if Notre Dame is ultimately pushed in that direction there. And there's obviously been some conversation going on there. So I would say no, I would not pick the SEC over the Big Ten. I would still pick the Big Ten over the SEC. And I'm not going to get hung up over something that happened over 100 years ago. It's the reason for carrying any kind of grudges.
Right.
When it comes
I get
to
it.
Conversation either.
Like, I get that part. I get that whole conversation. I don't like the Big Ten. I never have.
Yeah.
But if you're putting a gun to my head and you're telling me to pick between the SEC and the Big Ten, I'm picking the Big Ten.
Well, and the thing with the Big Ten now, as opposed to even last year, is they are a more national conference. There's obviously a heck of a lot of travel that's going to be involved, but you get to LA and you get to the Pacific Northwest as well, and you get to the East Coast out there, with Rutgers being out there and with Maryland being out there. So from Notre Dame's perspective, between the academics and that factor, that still suits you pretty well in terms of you're still going to be able to carry your brand across the country if you were in the Big Ten versus the SEC, which is still much more regionalized.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't like the fact you're making an argument for the Big Ten, but I don't disagree with you.
Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Ooh, is it time?
It is time.
All right, there's some good stuff in here today. I'm kind of excited about it.
I'm glad you liked it. I did my best.
I mean, you always do. You always come through.
Cooking with the brain cells. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Gabe Rubio is back with the Fighting Irish after taking a leave of absence from the team during the spring.
It's fantastic for a multitude of reasons. Number one, he took care of whatever it was that took him away from Notre Dame. I don't know what that was, but he took care of it, so good on him. And from a football standpoint, it just adds that much more depth to the interior defensive line, which I love that as well. So it's awesome that Gabe Rubio is back.
Absolutely agree on all counts. And I mean, honestly, when you hear that a guy is taking a leave of absence from the team during spring practice, it's like, okay. I mean, you've got like And I realize people panic about transfer portal and stuff like that, but there was every reason to believe that he was not going to be back. And I think that he can really be I was about to say nice addition. He was already on the team, so he's not a nice addition, but just another really good piece for this team going forward, because they were better against the run when Gabriel Rubio was part of that run defense. He was a big part of that. He was very strong, very physical up the middle. And so from Notre Dame's perspective, it's nothing but good to have Gabriel Rubio on the team. So glad to see him back as well.
Absolutely agree. There's no negative to it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a negative to whoever the 86th or 87th person on scholarship is, but it's not a negative for him or the team.
No. Yeah. I mean, and that is still a thing. It's going
to
be really interesting to see exactly where that goes, because they still do have to trim it by a couple of spots still.
Right. So. And they will. Everybody's all got their panties in a bunch about the roster. It always works out. It'll be fine. It'll be fine, everybody. Take a breath.
So Marcus Freeman recently said, when opposing defenses loaded the box to take away Notre Dame's running game last season, quote, "We didn't always make them pay," end quote, by throwing the football. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you the Irish can and will make teams pay if it happens this year?
As long as Riley Leonard is the quarterback, I think they will absolutely make teams pay. And I'll leave it at that. So it's a 10 for me. I think they have the right coordinator who will take advantage of matchups and, hats in the box and all of those different things. I think he will see that. He will adapt to it, and he will be successful. And as long as he has the guys that he needs to be making those plays, i.e. starting quarterback and the starting wide receivers that we think are all going to be there helping out, and you're going to be just fine. So it's a high number for me.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they weren't able to it is a little head scratching that you have a quarterback with Sam Hartman's experience and you weren't able to do that sometime, because you expect that he's going to be able to do some things at the line of scrimmage to put them in better positions.
He didn't. That's
right.
That's the thing. And everybody wants to blame the offensive coordinator, and that's not where my blame goes. Now, he's still the offensive coordinator and the buck stops with him. I get that. But for whatever reason, Sam was not going through his reads the way he should have gone through his reads the second half of the season. And so they weren't making teams pay. And to his credit, in my opinion, the offensive coordinator was like, well, we got to take the ball out of this guy's hands because he's not doing what he needs to do with the football and getting it where it needs to go. So we're going to run the ball and take our chances. And they ended up, banging their head against the wall, it felt like at times. But the quarterback wasn't executing the game plan. That's the problem.
Right.
For a myriad of reasons, he was not executing the game plan. And so that's why I said, as long as Riley Leonard's the quarterback, I think they will be fine.
And between Riley Leonard being the quarterback, between the receivers he's going to have this year that Sam Hartman also didn't have at his disposal last year, I think that was part of the piece.
Yeah.
And I also wonder how much this helmet communication thing can come into play, because when we talked to Mike Denbrock about it in the spring, he talked about how, because you have until the play clock hits 15 seconds that you can communicate. So that's almost 30 seconds that you've got. It comes on when the play clock starts. It shuts off at 15 seconds. So you've got 25 seconds there.
That's a long time.
Yeah, we're with the quarterback, and like Mike Denbrock was saying, you can say, hey, kind of keep an eye on this. Look at this. What are you seeing? Those kind of things. Now, obviously, the quarterback can't talk back, but it's like he can give them little reminders as they go to the line of scrimmage and talk about some of that stuff. And I think that can potentially be an advantage for Notre Dame as well, between a veteran OC and a veteran quarterback.
I think the biggest challenge, and I'll speak from a coach's perspective on this, I think the biggest challenge is that he will have to be careful how much coaching he's putting into the ear of the quarterback.
Right. You don't want to
have to limit yourself.
You don't want to overcomplicate.
Yes.
Right.
And that's going to be a challenge, because you know what you're seeing as a coach and all of that stuff, and you want to disseminate that information to the quarterback, and you want him to disseminate that information to the rest of the team. But you got to be real careful how much information. It can't be information overload, right? And then it cuts off mid-sentence,
Right.
So that's going to be a real kind of a feeling out process, I think, for coaches around the country, not just at Notre Dame.
Right. And now a couple of different things, because Michael's talking about, Hartman was not in a quarterback friendly offense. It was Reese's scan offense, no audibles. I think
that's not true. That is not. There was audibles. There were all of those things.
There were audibles. It was just a question of, did he make the audibles when he needed to make the audibles? Now, what I was going to say, in terms of the difference in offense is, and again, this is something we've touched on quite a bit, the difference in that extra tight end not being out there on the field is naturally going to open up the field to let them do a multitude of things between the pass game and the run game. And so it's like, okay, you want to stack the box. Well, we've got 11 personnel or we've got 10 personnel. So now you've got to deal with that. And if you can't make them pay it when they're trying to load the box, when you've got lighter personnel out there on the field, it's obviously you that have the problems as an offense, So
Absolutely.
I think that's going to help take care of some of that stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, I'm not saying that Jared Parker was the be all end all, best offensive coordinator in the country. I'm not saying that, but Sam Hartman had options.
Sam Hartman was a sixth-year quarterback.
He was not using the options that he was given. Yes. And did he audible very much? No. That wasn't because the offensive coordinator wouldn't allow him to do it. I want to make that very clear, right? And there were times where he wasn't going through his progressions. He was forcing the ball to the first read. Okay. That you can talk about wide receiver injuries. You can talk about all these different things. There were guys running open, regardless of whether the problem is he didn't trust those receivers for whatever reason. Yeah. We don't need to get into all of that.
And I mean, I've got to disagree on this with Michael as well. He says you can't attack in the scan offense. I mean,
100% can,
because the scan offense is not necessarily a system. It's just a mode of, how you're relaying plays in from the line of scrimmage. And there are plenty of college offenses who stand at the line of scrimmage and let the offensive coordinator make calls from the sideline. That's what the scan offense is. They're literally standing up at the line of scrimmage and then scanning and then making their calls. Now, It obviously slows things down, but it's like the scan offense is not the offense. It's the system that you're going about getting the plays in and making the checks that are coming from the press box or the sideline to the quarterback.
The definition of an attacking offense isn't going fast. That's not the definition of an attacking offense.
Right.
The attacking offense is what the play is. It's not like going no huddle or hurry or whatever. That's not an attacking offense. That's just going fast. There are plenty of hurry up offenses. Just run the ball. That's not attacking. So that I disagree on the definition of attack. You can attack in the scan
he's saying
offense.
The sidelines reading at Tommy Rees in the booth. Now, if you want to say that Tommy Rees was part of the problem, I'm not going to disagree with you.
That's fine. And that's fine. Yeah. But Tommy Rees wasn't Sam Hartman's quarterback.
Right.
Coach.
Offensive coordinator. It was Jared Parker last year.
Neither one of those things.
Now, were they largely running the same thing? Yeah, but we don't have to get caught up.
Right.
Like stuck in that. The bottom line is there's a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback, and we expect it to look completely different this year.
Absolutely.
So we were talking earlier this week about potential Irish breakout players for the season, and we talked about this guy a little bit earlier. Do you buy or sell Jordan Botelho as a breakout candidate?
You worded this question very interesting.
I was wondering how you would receive this because I thought about it after I worded it. I'm like, do I change the wording? Do I leave it? So give me your interpretation.
Yes. So my interpretation of this question is he a candidate? I'll buy that he's a candidate. Okay, he's absolutely a candidate because he has not broken out yet. I do not think he will break out. That's my opinion. And
those are the two different ways you could interpret this, and that's exactly how I feel. Like I feel like he is a candidate because he hasn't broken out yet. We're still waiting for him to break out, so he is a candidate. But is it finally going to click? It just seems and feels like we've been waiting too long. I think he'll be a solid player, but I don't think we're going to see a completely different Botelho this year.
Yes, I completely agree with that. He's a candidate. I think he's going to get passed up. I mean, he's got all the talent in the world. He's just so inconsistent. I can't. This is perfect. NH says I want to buy, but I'm selling. And that's kind of where I'm at. I would love to buy it because that means that's how much better the Notre Dame defense is going to be. but I can't do it.
In DK's world, you have solved the problem. Maybe we've both solved the problem. He's going to get 15 sacks now.
I have to underestimate everybody on the team, and then they'll be good to go.
Yes. So we are going to, yesterday we predicted Michigan's record for the season. We're going to do Texas today. Longhorns have an over-under win total of 10.5 this season. So let's go through the schedule. They open at home against Colorado State.
W.
No reason to believe that they would lose that one.
I would hope not.
Yes. They go to Michigan. And this is actually an interesting, I didn't realize Texas and Michigan were playing until I saw Michigan's schedule yesterday. But they go to Michigan week 2.
It's a bit of a trap game, obviously. But I don't think Michigan is the Michigan of last year for a myriad of reasons. And I will take Texas in this one.
Completely agree. Jesse and I both had Texas with a win on this yesterday when we did Michigan's schedule. And, Texas has everything that you need coming back. They lose some pieces, whereas Michigan down a head coach, down a quarterback, all these down a starting, all these different questions.
The team is like turned over almost 50% from what it was last year. So
exactly. So
that's going to be
2-0 then for Texas, going back home to play UT San Antonio.
Before I give you my prediction on the UT San Antonio game, what did you guys come up with for the Michigan record? Were you guys?
We thought we had 9-3.
Okay.
Their over/under was 9.5. We had them 9-3.
Okay.
With a chance. Jesse brought up a good point with all the new that they're facing, especially a first-time head coach. We saw room for even a slip up that maybe they end up 8-4.
Yeah, I totally could see that for sure. I don't. I'm never all in on Michigan, but yeah, I could definitely see that as well. I don't. They're not going to have the year that Michigan fans want, but Michigan fans won't care because they're still riding that national championship. So
yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Sorry.
They've got a pretty favorable schedule though, actually, too. I think they play like their first 5 games at home or something.
Of course they do.
Like that. Yeah.
Of course they do. It's the Alabama North. Anyway, UT San Antonio, I'm going to give the dub to Texas on that one.
Yeah, me too. I don't think I think it's the Roadrunners maybe of UT San Antonio.
University of Texas, San Antonio. So is that like IU coming up and playing like IUSB? I
think it's a little bigger than that. I think
I know, but like, are they a satellite school of Texas? Like, are they playing their own like?
That's a good point. I think they are actually. Yeah,
it just cracks me up. Like, how is that even a thing? Whatever.
Okay, so they're 3-0 after San Antonio, and then Louisiana Monroe is the next home game.
Yes, another win.
4-0.
Yep.
Mississippi State. Any reason to think that they'll lose to the Bulldogs?
No, there's no reason that I think they should lose to the Bulldogs. I think that's another W. I think, Mississippi State can never quite seem to figure it all out. They have some upsets here and there, but like as a whole, they can't seem to figure it out. So I don't think they're going to be able to defeat a juggernaut like Texas.
I don't either. So the Longhorns with a 5-0 start, and now they're rolling. They're going to get into SEC play for the first time. Interestingly, though, their first ever SEC game is going to be an old Big 12 matchup. Their big rival, Oklahoma.
Well, Mississippi State's an SEC game.
Oh, that's true. I'm not. What was I thinking?
I don't know, but that's okay.
No, you're right. You're right. I don't even know what I was thinking by saying that. That was
good.
That was just stupid, is what it was. So
they sound like me trying to retrace your steps after saying something dumb. Like that's me. That's my job. That's my role.
Right.
I think they still beat Oklahoma. I am not sold on Oklahoma's head coach. I'm not sold on him as a head coach at all. And so I think Texas being who I think they are, top 5 team, I think they beat Oklahoma.
I concur. So now we've got Texas at 6-0, and they get to host Georgia for game number 7.
Yeah, this will be, my guess is both teams will be undefeated coming into this game, and it's middle of the season. This will be a massive game across the country, right? Texas, Georgia, people will be saying it's a playoff preview, all these different things, which I agree with, by the way. But I think Georgia gets Texas in this particular matchup.
I do as well. I think the Longhorns suffer their first loss of the season when they host the Bulldogs, and that's actually, like, looking at it as I actually should have. They actually start off their SEC life with 3 consecutive SEC home games. Mississippi State.
It's
well,
impressive.
I guess Oklahoma's not at home. I keep butchering that. Oklahoma keeps throwing me because that'll be in Dallas. That'll be in Dallas where they always play it. So
sure, that makes sense. So it's a neutral site, technically.
Red River. Yep, that's
technically.
Right. So Georgia gives them their first loss. Then they go to Vanderbilt. Clark Lee, can he get it done?
Fighting Clark Lee's will not get it done. And in my viewing of the Athlon magazine that just came out, which is a good read, by the way, but coaches on the hot seat, Clark Lee made that list. So this loss will not help him in that front.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, like when Clark Lee made that move to Vanderbilt, everybody knew it was going to be an uphill battle for him. And
I mean, he's doing what he can.
I know.
But Vanderbilt in the SEC, it's like they really would love their life, I think. Outside of the check that they get cut, they just fit better elsewhere, I would say.
Exactly. So Texas is 7-1 after a probable beatdown of Vanderbilt in game number 8. Then they host Florida.
Could be another really good game, potentially. I'm just not sold on Florida yet. They're not at the caliber of Texas, so I will take Texas.
Yeah, I think Billy Napier is I don't know if he was on the hot seat in that Athlon list, but he might be reeling a little bit by this stage of the season when you get to the last 4 or 5 games of the season there. And
that's true.
I think Texas isn't going to do him any favors. I think the Longhorns pull out with a win over the Gators, and then they go to Arkansas, an old Southwestern Conference rival.
The SWAC.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sioux Pigs, I don't think are going to be able to get it done, even though it's at Arkansas. And that could be a trap game for sure for Texas. Because
I think it could be. Yeah.
They haven't been to Arkansas, I'm guessing, in quite a while. And Arkansas is a kind of a dark horse team in the SEC. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but I think they could maybe make some noise. You know what I mean? I think they can get an upset here or there and kind of hurt some people's seasons, that kind of stuff. So I do kind of feel like this is a bit of a toss-up game since it's at Arkansas, but I still, on paper, I got to give it to Texas.
I feel like sitting here in June, it's going to be, especially when like you're on a stretch, you're going on the road now. Yep. I think this will be a very close game. I think it'll be very close and very competitive going into Fayetteville, but I do think Texas ends up winning, so they'll be 9-1 coming out of that with 2 games to go. Kentucky is the 11th game of the season.
Yeah, and Kentucky has played spoiler in the past. I think at this point their season will be in rough shape, and I just don't think they've got the firepower to go up against Texas, so I will take Texas at home in their final home game of the season.
I will as well. So now the Longhorns are 10-1, and they're in good shape. For all the West Coast guys predicting 5 SEC teams in the college football playoff, Texas is feeling pretty good about getting back to the playoff. They finish off with their rival, a team that they haven't played since Texas A&M joined the SEC a dozen years ago. At Texas A&M, the Longhorns and the Aggies to close out the regular season.
This is the tough one because I think this is going to be a very different Texas A&M team in game 12 than it will be in game 1 when Notre Dame sees them, right? And I think Mike Elko is a really good coach. And I think he'll be able to fix some of the problems that A&M is going to inevitably have in week 1 when they play against Notre Dame. I think there's going to be a lot of praise going on for Texas going into this game. I think there's going to be a lot of, playoff projections and, all of these different things. I'm going to call for the upset. I'm going to say that A&M wins this game at home, although it's definitely an upset. Like, I still think Texas will probably win, but I'm going to call for the upset because I just don't want to chalk it. I just don't want to chalk it this entire way. So I'll call for the upset here.
Yeah, I mean, really the only quote unquote upset that I would feel really comfortable with is Oklahoma, just because of the competitiveness of that
That's fair.
series over the years. And, like you, I'm not completely sold on Brent Venables and just where they are and everything else. But I think, like he should be able to give them maybe a little bit of a fit defensively, just like what you're talking about. Texas A&M should as well. When I look at Texas A&M right now, between their quarterback situation and their offense, I think that defensively they'll be able to limit Texas, but I just don't think that A&M is going to have enough offense this
That's
year,
fair.
to beat an elite team like
Right.
this. So I'm going to go with the Longhorns.
And that's probably what will occur. The only thing I think will potentially play into the favor of Texas A&M is I could see Texas overlooking Texas A&M. It's the end of the season. It's the last game. They're not playing at home anymore.
Yeah.
People are going to have them projected going to the Final Four potentially if they're 10-1 going into this game. Like, I could see that, especially if A&M is like 500. You know what I mean? Or maybe, I don't know, 6-5 going into this game, whatever the case may be. I feel like they could look past Texas A&M, and that would be, in my opinion, that would be a mistake going into Texas A&M in their final game of the season, because I feel like Texas A&M is just going to be playing for pride, and they're going to want to beat Texas like so badly. They're going to want to beat Texas more than Texas is going to want to beat A&M.
Kind of like beating LSU at the end of the year.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's exactly correct.
Right.
And so Sarkisian's gonna have to do a really good job of keeping that Texas team focused on Texas A&M and not looking past that game. Again, I think Texas will probably win. I'm just saying I'm going to call for the upset here because I think there's the possibility. This has got trap game written all over it for Texas.
Brent wants to know when we're going to break down Notre Dame's 24 schedule.
All summer.
We've got some time on that one, but I think we will definitely have to dedicate a whole show to it. But we also want to obviously be able to do some research and talk with some facts on each of the opponents as we do it. So we've got time. We've got time on our side for that one.
Yes.
Jack dropped a question in that I'll plop up here for rapid fire. Women's basketball, which player is the biggest X factor for the success of the team in 24-25? I mean, this is so interesting because as loaded as they're going to be, it's like, how do you pick an X factor? Because you're kind of saying, a little bit below the radar, maybe. And I mean, like they've got 6 different players on the roster who have earned all conference in their career, and that includes the 2 incoming players, Liza Carlin from Marquette and Leah King from Pitt. And then you've got Maddie Westbeld, got Olivia Miles coming back, you got Sonia Citron, you got Hannah Hidalgo. Obviously, I'll just say King, the Pitt transfer, will be my X factor. And she was first team all ACC. She averaged the double-double last year, but I think that she'll really be able to hurt some teams because of all the other players that you've got to focus on with the shooters they're going to have on this team between, again, Miles and Hidalgo and Westbeld and Citron. It's just the floor is going to be so loaded. And really, King's big thing is just go out there and grab us 10 rebounds per game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that she's going to have the ability to really hurt some teams otherwise, because of the fact that maybe she can kind of get lost a little bit with all those scores that they've got there on the floor.
Yep. Completely agree.
That's
a good one. I like that one a lot.
Want to go ahead and put this up here. Irish for Life says he's asking for prayers and he's panicking real bad right now with some medical issues. He says he's not sure what to say, terrified at the moment. Please pray. Sounds very, very serious. And I hope that I'm not knowing any more details, just everyone throw him some prayers. And obviously we hope that things turn around. And
for sure.
Hopefully things go well. And glad that you're here. Maybe we can kind of help take your mind off some of that stuff a little bit. I don't know if that helps or not. Today, Vince, you're a big Cubs fan. Today is the actual anniversary of the Chicago Cubs Atlanta Braves game at Wrigley Field, June 5th, 1985. What's the significance? That is the game that was the actual game that they used in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You remember, like, when the principal is walking around, Mr. Rooney.
Yeah. Swing,
That's right. The game that was on TV, and you remember there was a ball that was fouled off. Claudel Washington fouled the ball off. What's interesting about this game is the game that they used on TV and the scene where they're actually sitting in the stands were not the same game. Apparently, the one at the stands where they're actually in the stands and you see them get the foul ball wasn't until September. But the game that they actually depicted with Harry Carey doing the play-by-play and everything else was 39 years ago today.
Wow.
A guy, now I saw this morning come up. Somebody posted a story about this. A guy recently sold actual ticket stubs for the game for $1,000 each. Would you pay that much for a ticket stub to anything?
Not a chance. There is no chance a ticket stub to any event of all time. Like, they could have sold tickets to the birth of Jesus, and I wouldn't pay $1,000 for that ticket stub. Like, there's no way. There's no chance I would use that kind of money on a ticket stub.
And not for a ticket stub. I mean, unless
you don't even get to go to the event.
Right.
No way.
Right. Because I'm trying to, like, you went to the World Series. Did you actually get a stock ticket stub?
It was a print off because everything's digital, of course.
Right. Exactly.
So it's a printed off ticket, and then I bought one of the lanyards that you shove the ticket in. It's got like the lanyard neck thing, and it's hanging in my office at school. So I did that because I knew I wanted to display it. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's still just a printed off deal. It was not an actual ticket stub.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I would not either. Like, there's like a lot of other things that I could spend $1,000 on, and a ticket stub for a game that I didn't even go to would not be one of them. So
no way, man. Especially I realize it ended up being a real game, but it's not even a significant game in sports history.
Right.
It's a TV game.
Right. And apparently it wasn't until 2011, someone actually sat down and like watched the movie and the things that happened. Again, Claudel Washington from the Braves fouled the pitch off. And so, they were trying, someone actually went back, narrowed it down, figured all this stuff out. Some guy, the guy who sold the ticket stubs for $1,000 each, he had bought like 20,000 old ticket stubs from some guy. And this game had a few of them in there, and he sold the stubs for $1,000 each. He made a $6,000 profit by selling ticket stubs to that game, completely inconsequential game, but it happened to be featured in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
That's crazy all by itself.
I know.
First of all, I mean, good for him. What great RTI, right? Return on ROI, return on investment. Like,
there you go.
Good for him. I know.
It's good.
Whoever paid that. Whoever paid that just has to be like wiping their butt with money. Like, I can't even imagine having that kind of money just like laying around. Like, $1,000 for an old ticket stub. It's all yours. Crazy.
Have you ever played hooky to go to a sporting event?
Yes. Senior skip day. We hopped the L train and we went to a Cubs game.
Nice.
So
I
was
wondering if that ever happened in your life. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool trip.
Yeah. Oh, it was. Well, and you know what the funny thing is, because senior skip day is like an understood day that everybody is not there. Well, I went to a Catholic high school. And they kind of had like a week's worth of events kind of like planned. And it was going to be like there was a service day and there was a this and that. Well, at the last minute, they decided because of the weather, they changed the service day to the day of senior skip day. And then senior skip day was now the service day. We already had the tickets.
So you're
I went to the principal and I was like, look, we're going to the Cubs game.
We made plans.
And they're like, okay, you can come in on senior skip day then and just do some service around the school. We just hung out in the library all day.
Nice.
But like, we came in when there was no other seniors in the building and we skipped service day and went to Chicago. So it's like, am I really skipping? Maybe, but that's the best I've got for you.
I love it. I would have had to have driven like 3.5 hours to go to Kansas City to try to skip out for anything. So never happened for me. Never happened. Although actually, I guess I did. I had a girlfriend who was a diver, and I did skip out on school because like they went like a couple hours away for like a meet in the middle of the day or something like that. So I guess I did technically skip out for that, but not like big time sporting event.
There are rumors, and they're just rumors at the moment, but there have been tickets purchased to a Cubs-Tigers game. It's the second day of school in the fall. So there's a chance that I'll be skipping the second day of school to go to a game. I don't know how my boss is going to feel about that, but we'll see.
Do you buy or sell Ferris Bueller's Day Off as Matthew Broderick's best movie?
I was trying to, like, off the top of my head, without Googling or anything else, coming up with other Matthew Broderick movies.
It's pretty tough, actually.
It is very tough. I thought that, oh, gosh, now I can't even remember the name. The Producers. Obviously, that's based on a musical or whatever. I thought that was really good. It's a comedy. I thought it was funny. Doesn't hold a candle, though, to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, unless I'm missing something, it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I think Ferris Bueller's Day Off is number one. I don't think I ever saw The Producers, actually. I know what the movie's about and everything. Sure. And they actually depicted it in a season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, actually.
Oh, did they really?
Back where Larry David was in The Producers.
It's funny.
And Matthew Broderick made his way in there and stuff.
I mean, they basically want to tank a musical, and so they make a musical about Hitler, and it ends up being popular. And it's so everything like backfires. Andre's got a good one.
I forgot about Glory. Completely forgot about Glory. I was racking my brain. That's a pretty good one.
And see, I didn't Google it. But Glory is one of my all-time favorite movies. That is true.
Andrew says Cable Guy.
That's a hard
You're
pass.
either hardcore Cable Guy or you're out on Cable Guy. That was just
out.
Too weird for me. I'm way out on that one.
I'm out.
This would be, I think Ferris is number one. This is my number two that Brian NY says War Games. Very
interesting.
Have you ever seen
No.
This is like the computer system and stuff is very dated, but it's basically, like Matthew Broderick, and I can't remember if it was actually his girlfriend or just a girl he was friends with. They almost inadvertently start a thermonuclear war, by screwing around on the computer, playing a game on the computer. There's like a launch that's a launch countdown that gets going, and he kind of has to help prevent the thermonuclear war from happening ultimately after almost starting it. But that was a couple years before Ferris Bueller. Still a very good one.
Okay.
But I've got to put Ferris Bueller at the top of the list. Yep, you're right, Brian. Ali Sheedy was the girlfriend, or the girl or the friend or whatever exactly she was.
I have now officially Googled Matthew Broderick's catalog. And I still hold tight to the fact that Ferris Bueller's number one. Glory, for me, would be number two. And then I would also agree that Lion King would come in at number three, based on...
What did he do in Lion King? I guess
he was the voice of Simba, adult Simba.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah. So you had Jonathan Taylor Thomas was child Simba, and then Matthew Broderick was adult Simba.
Okay.
So
what about Ferris Bueller in terms of high school 80s movies? Where do you put Ferris Bueller with the high school 80s movies?
So I know there are a lot of really good 80s, like high school type movies. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I believe, was in the 80s. Breakfast Club was in the 80s.
Yep, another good one.
For me, it's Ferris Bueller. I'm a big fan of Ferris Bueller, and I have rediscovered Ferris Bueller over the last couple of years when I found out that Mr. Rooney was actually the dean of students, which is my job now. So it made it even funnier to me because I could kind of relate to some of the stuff that goes on. Now, granted, it's a comedy, obviously, but it's Ferris Bueller, and it's not all that, like 16 Candles, like all of those different things. Those didn't really resonate with me. You're a few years older than me, so those more resonate.
Like I remember seeing all these movies at the theater basically.
Right. When you were in high school or
exactly.
So
Or right, yeah. I would go Fast Times.
Okay.
I would go Ferris Bueller. Now, I've probably seen Ferris Bueller more often, but I just actually watched Fast Times again. I would put Fast Times at the top. I would put Ferris Bueller number 2. And then Breakfast Club, 16 Candles. I would put both of them right afterwards.
Andrew this is a good one from Andrew, though. He says, is Back to the Future in this category?
That's a good question.
I mean,
he was in high school and he did go back to high school too.
Yeah. If that's the case, Back to the Future just leapt Ferris Bueller for me. If we're putting it in the category, and I think we have to.
Michael says airplane. Michael, that's the best joke you've ever told on this show.
That's great.
What about St. Elmo's Fire, says Brent? Well, they were in college in St. Elmo. They were actually finishing up college.
Never saw that
one. You can't
one.
include that for high school. Andre says, I'm not that old. I don't know what you mean by that, but you can't tell me that every morning. So I definitely feel that old. But yeah, Back to the Future. I didn't think about it.
I didn't think about that either.
It's a high school movie, but I think you've got to. I mean, he goes back to high school. Yeah.
The first one is pretty much set in high school. Now, it's not his it is his high school, but 30 years prior. So, I mean, the whole thing's set in high school. You got the dance, you got all that. So, I think it is.
I'd still put it number 4, I think.
Okay.
I would put Breakfast Club in front of it. Then I'd put Back to the Future, and then I'd go 16 Candles after that.
Fair enough. It's number 1 for me, and then Ferris is 2. So, and then the rest are all kind of together for me towards the bottom, then that slot.
Got to be sure and get this DK super chat in here. Thank you very much, DK. He says, can you break down the fullback recruiting in 25 and 26?
DK.
I don't know where exactly that came from.
Thanks for the super chat, DK.
Yes.
But come on, dude.
Appreciate it.
He obviously is telling a joke there, but
So this one's for you from Ryan. Would you rather room with Brian Kelly for a year in a 1-bedroom apartment, or Dylan goes to Michigan and you have to start the Wolverine Breakdown podcast? That's legit.
It is a legit question, but it's an easy answer. It would be the second one. I do not have any desire to live with Brian Kelly in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's funny.
The Odd Couple.
Yes. When you and I went up to Michigan for a game, and this was back when Jesse was in high school, and he was kind of a fullback linebacker, and we were joking around about him walking on at Michigan to be a fullback. Do you remember that conversation or that topic?
Vaguely, but yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm going to have to learn how to root for Michigan if Jesse is on the team. You know what I mean? And so I had already kind of started that thought process. And look, I hate Michigan. There's no two ways about it, but it's a very good school. It's a very good academic school. And so if my kid ended up getting a degree from Michigan, it would hurt my heart, but I know that he would be very successful, after that. But if he's getting recruited by Michigan, he damn well better be getting recruited by Notre Dame. That's how I would kind of spin it. But
fair.
I would, of course, root for my son and do the whole Michigan thing if I had to.
Yep. Got some late high school movie suggestions. Pretty in Pink. That was like, I remember like Ducky is the thing that stands out the most from that one. John Cryer, the guy that ended up on 2.5 Men. You've never seen Pretty in Pink? That was another Molly Ringwald movie.
She never did anything for me. I was never a huge fan of Molly Ringwald.
I was never, like, weird.
I don't know. Maybe that's
Molly Ringwald was a thing back then.
Growing up in the 80s. I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, so it was a solid movie. Big hit at the time. Another one that I remember seeing, but I think that was like, felt like the ladies like Pretty in Pink. Like a little bit more than like 16 Candles had enough. Like there was a lot of what's his name? Anthony Michael Hall. In 16 Candles.
Yes, there was.
A lot of good comedy in there. Weird Science, another good one. I forgot about that one. But
I remember Weird Science for obvious reasons. I mean, it definitely had some good qualities to it.
I think about Weird Science less for like anything related to high school as opposed to just two dorky kids hanging out with a hot lady, right?
The casting was awesome.
All right. Well, I think we will end it with that. Another good show, a lot of good questions in there tonight. And glad that we could spark some memories with the 80s high school
It's good stuff.
comedies. It's We In, We Out day tomorrow, so don't forget, get over to the Champions Lounge and get your We In, We Out questions for tomorrow's show. We will be answering there. Coffees for closers. Yes, the Breakfast Club was on my list. We didn't go into detail about it, but
that
Breakfast
is
Club, I think I had it like third maybe on my list.
Yeah, it was in that neighborhood. Like that. I think it was on the medal stand.
Yes, that's right. All right, well, that's going to do it. Hit that like button before you leave. We do appreciate you as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.